It's no secret that the video game retail store, GameStop, has seen better days as faster internet speeds make physical stores increasingly less attractive. So how did the share price of a company which has been closing hundreds of stores each year jump by nearly 2000% and come to be worth more than powerhouses like American Airlines? This story, which hasn't even met its conclusion, has seen billions of dollars on the line, millions of average traders striving for a single collective goal, and some of the most blatant corruption on Wall Street since the 2008 financial crisis. It's a tale of passion, excitement, greed, and conspiracy, and will be handled much better than the transition to today's sponsor. Whether you're protecting your millions in stocks or just can't be spending the extra 13 seconds filling in your information at an online checkout, then you'll probably want Dashlane to be by your side. Dashlane makes it easy to manage personal information like addresses, credit cards, and passwords, and moves your browsing experience into some kind of internet fast lane. Dashlane is able to generate virtually uncrackable passwords that are presumably inspired by the Welsh language, which are then encrypted and auto-filled whenever you so need them, meaning you'll never be caught trying to remember impossible to answer recovery questions like your favorite band in 2008 or your mother's birthday. Dashlane also works across multiple devices and even includes a VPN for that extra protection, meaning you can get a new iPhone every day of the week and still be covered. If this sounds helpful and you want to try Dashlane for free on your first device, you can do so by heading to dashlane.com/SirSwag, and if you want to upgrade to premium, you can use the code SirSwag for 50% off. Dashlane, where security is just a side effect of being lazy. It all started on r/Wall Street Bets, a place for internet dwellers to post their stock holdings or speculate about shares that are destined to become more valuable. It all began around a year before it started hitting headlines when a user by the name of Deep Fucking Value posted a screenshot showing he had just bought $50,000 worth of GameStop shares, a move almost unthinkable to many users at the time. Although he was met with an abundance of comments essentially calling him a smooth brain idiot, this man fucking held on, and by the time January 2021 rolled around, he was starting to turn some heads. The next part gets slightly complicated, but we are confident that a big Chad like yourself will keep up. Essentially, how stocks work is that you buy a minuscule portion of a company as you predict that over time, as the business grows, that stock will be worth more and you'll be able to sell those stocks for more money than you bought them in the first place. However, if you believe that a company is failing, you can make an opposite prediction. How this works is that you can borrow a certain number of stocks which you don't actually own at its current price and sell them to others. Assuming the stock price goes down, you'll later be able to buy them back at a lower price, return the stock to the original lender, and pocket the difference. This doesn't mean that things can't go wrong with this method. For example, if you were to short Swag News Incorporated at $10 right before we announce a new series, which causes the stock to rise to $15, you can either hope that the price eventually goes back down or get out at a $5 loss if you predict the stock price is expected to rise. On failing businesses, shorting a stock can be an easy way for hedge funds to make a few extra dollars, but not if they are collectively brought back from the brink of death by millions of small-time degenerate investors. As it turns out, Wall Street Bets figured out that a number of hedge funds had a lot of money in GameStop shorts, so they banded together with a brilliant idea. If a large proportion of all 2 million members suddenly bought a metric fuck ton of GameStop stock at the same time, this would cause a spike in demand and a shorter supply, which would force the value of GameStop sky high. This continued over a month as the price slowly rose from $20, $50, $200, and all the way up to just short of $500 as new people were rapidly catching on to the plan. The entire idea was as these short sellers, who were obliged to buy back stock at market price, were reaching their expiration date, this would act as a kind of feedback loop of more people buying, leading to the price of GameStop shooting more rapidly toward planet Jupiter. Understandably, this shit started ruffling some feathers of hedge fund managers. who were set to lose millions from this community of people who were overly enthusiastic about the prospects of GameStop. Many started making calls for stricter financial regulations, citing unprecedented losses from the GameStop situation, which is destined to be immortalized in the history books. Unsurprisingly, these hedge funds found very little sympathy with regulators and the public alike, many pointing to the fact that they've been doing exactly the same thing for years and only now experiencing what they've long done to individual traders. One of the most hurt firm from this whole ideal is Melvin Capital, who by the 26th of January saw a 30% loss to the tune of $3.7 billion. The hedge fund later got a bailout from a pair of billionaires by the names of Ken Griffin and Steve Cohen at a combined $2.7 billion. By the 27th of January, support from the stock kingmaker himself, Elon Musk, spurred the GameStop share price to $351, up from less than $20 at the start of the month, and this is where the entire situation starts getting particularly weird. The Wall Street Bets Discord server was suddenly taken down, with Discord officially explaining the ban as down to hate speech, glorifying violence, and spreading misinformation. The Reddit page was then set to private, causing suspicion that this may be a targeted takedown, but they were soon both back to their former glory, albeit with questions about whether there were ulterior intentions behind these shutdowns. By the very next day, on the 28th of January, a number of stock trading platforms were found to have restricted the trade of GameStop shares, among a handful of other shares that were receiving similar treatment. This obviously didn't go down well with individual traders, as despite the restriction being placed on individual investors using these services, institutional investors were permitted to trade freely. The poster child for this double standard was the platform, Robinhood, which branded itself as a trading tool for the everyman, named of course after the story of Robin of Locksley, famously known for taking from the rich and giving to the poor. As you could probably imagine, these restrictions seemingly designed to stop this exact scenario from taking place didn't go down well with its user base, and within an hour, the app went from a 4.4 star rating to a solid 1 star. This restriction sounds inconsequential, but with millions of people now dumping such an excessive amount of money into the stock, such a halt is extremely detrimental to the strategy. It would be like playing in an esports tournament with $1 million prize pool, but losing because your connection suddenly became 10 times slower than your opponent. When millions of dollars were on the line for people, it's unsurprising that many were extremely dissatisfied with restrictions being placed on trading. By the end of the 6-hour trading day, Robinhood promised to allow heavily restricted trading by the next day, but not before a class action complaint was filed by the Southern District of New York, whose website subsequently crashed after an influx of people tried to read the lawsuit. After an exhausting day for the stock market, after which Robinhood was facing total annihilation, the Wall Street Bets gang, now 3 times larger from the start of the month at 6 million strong, was facing accusations of being connected with the alt-right by both the Financial Times and a handful of other journalists. The Financial Times later apologized for the misreporting, while the other journalists could only claim that white supremacists were also trading the stock, which would be like calling ice cream evil just because Austrian Mustache Man also thought it tasted pretty good. By the end of January weekend, despite the fuckery from a number of different platforms, the GameStop share price still finished higher than it started, and with the message to hold GameStop shares being flown through the sky and in Times Square, hedge funds were getting even more terrified of the bottom line damage. However, by the time the market opened back up on Monday, it was clear that the hedge funds had a plan.
Let's come back to this morning, and it's not about stocks as you well know and Carl knows. It's about silver in particular, which seems to be the next target of this so-called Reddit cohort, or the merry men, I guess you may still be calling them, Jim. I mean,
like clockwork, a number of news outlets including CNN, the Financial Times, Fortune, USA Today, Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance, the BBC, and the Wall Street Journal all started reporting that Wall Street Bets had moved away from GameStop and onto investing in silver. The problem was, although I was on the page that entire weekend, writing this video in real time, I didn't see a single top post mentioning silver until Monday rolled around. In fact, by Monday, almost every post was talking about how silver was very much not the play, which led many to suspect that some fuckery was afoot. One user who decided to investigate these silver supporters found that around 80% of these accounts were only 2 days old. Along with this, the chief market strategist at an online financial trading and investing company made it known that silver was being traded at 1,000 times the volume compared to GameStop, making it infinitely harder to influence the price. What's even more suspicious is that the 5th largest shareholder of iShares Silver Trust just happened to be a hedge fund founded by billionaire Ken Griffin, who you might recognize as one of the 2 people who bailed out Melvin Capital. Why this is so significant is because with every share that investors sold due to getting cold feet or by attempting to chase different opportunities, hedge funds that shorted the stock could now buy GameStop shares at a lower price, eventually meaning they could get off easier in the long run. By the end of the day, GameStop was down nearly 1/3 of its value, and Netflix already had a movie in the works. The 2nd of February was not a good time for GameStop, as the price plummeted nearly 70% in one day. To the casual investor not in the loop about why the share price was so low, this might have seemed like a good time to cut their losses and get the fuck out, but there was far more in play with why the stock was now below $100. Firstly, several trading platforms had banned the buying of GameStop shares entirely, meaning there would be more sell orders by default. Secondly, it was discovered that as many as 97% of all posts on Wall Street bets over the weekend had been generated by bots, meaning a disinformation campaign to divide investors was very much in play. Lastly, evidence of straight up market manipulation was found to be used by a number of hedge funds, using what's called a short ladder attack. Here's how it worked. As most individual investors were restricted from trading, hedge funds had nearly free reign over the buying and selling of GameStop stock. From here, they would buy and sell shares between each other in rapid succession at lower and lower prices using bots, which would trick the algorithm into thinking the stock is getting dumped, which in turn tanks the price. This would hopefully spook enough people into selling at a loss, which would let them snap up much cheaper stocks in circulation at a hugely reduced price. The only problem with this plan is if people simply held onto their shares and did nothing, the artificial price reduction would only serve to give people a discount on more shares, which would be much more expensive when the hedge funds are forced to buy back. By the end of the day, billionaire investor Mark Cuban reassured Wall Street bets that their diamond hands would not go unrewarded and urged all investors to buy and hold at the dip. By the 3rd of February, GameStop stock went up less than 3%, and while Wall Street bets was busy making their case that the market was being manipulated by short ladder attacks, the US Securities and Exchange Commission was also busy investigating the Wall Street bets forum itself for any signs of fraud. At the same time, news sites covered how the GameStop bubble had now supposedly burst, further hurting the entire strategy, which relied on people holding their shares. At this stage, the entire situation was a prisoner's dilemma. If all shareholders agreed to do nothing, the interest on the shorts would force the price to rise, which would then force hedge funds to buy at a hugely inflated price. However, if people started selling at a loss, it could create mass panic, fueling a domino effect that would drive the price to next to worthless. A rational person would look at this situation and know that it's in their best interest to hold, but as we've seen before, human nature can be especially irrational, particularly when they've been told that the train had left without them. Before the end of the day, GameStop had announced a new CTO, Wall Street Bets was planning a Super Bowl commercial, and a news outlet complained about how the whole situation was sexist or something. By the 4th of February, there was a clear mood shift on Wall Street Bets. GameStop was now down another 40% to just $53 at close, and whether it was an artificial drop or not, morale was starting to take a hit. People were looking for reassurance, some had given up hope altogether, but the general sentiment still stood strong. These degenerates would be holding on to their shares for better or worse. People who have bought at a higher price would only be losing money by selling at such a low, and even the people who were one of the first to buy would be making next to nothing by selling at this point. There was also the very suspicious trend of both the share price of AMC Entertainment and GameStop both being targets of short squeeze shenanigans, seemingly being manipulated in exactly the same pattern. Overall, the uneventful day and the media trend dying down was probably one of the biggest contributing factors to the mood shift, but with Elon Musk throwing out another cryptic tweet, the end was far from near. By Friday, it seemed as if Wall Street bets had reached a sense of calm. The sentiment was hopeful that if it was taking an army of disinformation bots, a less than truthful media bombardment, short ladder attacks that risked prison time, and a myriad of class action lawsuits, all in a 9-day period, to stop this train from leaving the station, then Wall Street bets knew that at the very least, they had terrified hedge fund shorters. They figured that if these measures were preferable to what Wall Street bets investors were going to do to them, then why not take their sweet time and see where the situation leads. After all, Wall Street bets could hold on to their shares until the end of time, but hedge fund shorters, who pay interest on every share they've yet to buy back, don't quite have such a luxury. Assuming enough people don't decide to sell at a loss, this was now a battle of attrition. With the share price up 20% from the previous day, but still sitting at just $60. Many of the most adamant believers in the short squeeze doubled down and thanked the short ladder attacks for the easy discount, but at the close of market for the weekend, time was yet to tell whether they would be rewarded for their diamond hands. The following week was nowhere near as eventful. The hype had largely died down, the people who wanted to get out had already sold, and what remained was a group still content on hunkering down, as long as it takes. While this was happening, old moderators attempted a coup of Wall Street bets, and subsequently kicked over a dozen moderators out of their positions, reportedly to cash in on a lucrative movie deal. The older moderators were later stripped of their privileges. At the same time, Reddit itself spent its entire marketing budget on a 5-second Super Bowl ad referencing the Wall Street bets situation, but this in turn did little to influence the stock price in any meaningful way. Investors had speculated that information on short interest data might be able to prompt another upward trend. However, with huge discrepancies between sources and negligible fines for misreporting, it was impossible to say what was indeed accurate. As of time of writing, it's impossible to say where the GameStop situation will inevitably lead. This is the story about how a band of usually separate investors caught hedge funds flying too close to the sun and took an unprecedented risk to use the same exploit that was previously only reserved for the ultra wealthy. The game has now changed forever. Never before have so many people had so much power in the stock market, and this will likely cause a very serious rethink about what is and isn't possible when large firms make strategic decisions. The most interesting factor still yet decided is how this tale will end and what the legacy of the GameStop hype will be. Perhaps things will indeed tilt in favor of the Wall Street bets investors, and the story will be about the triumph of people collectively taking treasure from giants. Alternatively, perhaps this is a cautionary tale, a tale of market manipulation, astroturfing, media influence, and trade restrictions, all being purposely targeted to make sure average investors can't play by the same rules as hedge funds. If this happens, people will lose their houses, their life savings, or whatever else they optimistically put down to buy into this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because even when the only thing that needed to happen is for the free market to run its course, it seems that this isn't even a certainty when the wrong people make the right mistakes.
Soon may the Tendieman come to send a rocket into the sun. One day when the trading is done, we'll take our gains and go. Soon may the Tendieman come, we'll take our gains and go.